Rista and Seiya get back to Edna and Seiya watches Makina from a distance. Makina says 10 minutes is too long and all the villagers ran away, so she tries to kill Nina's father, but Seiya stops her by attacking her using Wind Blade, which hits her away. Makina tells Seiya that his ambush didn't work, but he tells her she was not his target in the first place, and she tells him he got her real good, but her objective is just him the hero. Makina realizes Seiya has surpassed her level even though it has only been less than 10 minutes then. She laughs and releases her true power, which makes her stats greater than Seiya's. Makina attacks Seiya with her sword, but he dodges and they both fight at high speed. Makina says Seiya can still keep up with her speed, so she's good to him her demonic cast. Rista tells Seiya to beware that Makina is going to use her special skill, but Makina stabs herself in the stomach and she turns into a greater demon, and Rista says her stats are higher than those of a demon lord of D-rank world and she has about 3 or 4 times Seiya's stats. Makina says Seiya can't win anymore and that she only needs one attack, and she attacks Seiya but he surprisingly parries it. Rista and Makina are surprised Seiya parried the attack, and Rista says no matter how nonsensical Seiya's talent is, he shouldn't be able to. Rista remembers the ability Seiya used in saving Nina's dad and said she thought she overlooked it in his status. But what if she didn't overlook it in the end? She can only reach one conclusion. The status both her and Makina were looking at using ability clairvoyance wasn't his real status. Rista tries to look at Seiya's status by pouring her godly power into her eyes, but his status is protected. The level of ability clairvoyance has to be higher than his fakes to be able to take a peek. Rista focuses all her power on her eyes so hard she's able to see Seiya's real stats, and she's surprised because it's 10 times the fake stats, and Rista says he couldn't have leveled up so fast, and she realizes he has been using a fake stat right from when she met him. Even when they first met Makina, his stat must have been higher than hers. Makina says she will display an extreme skill Seiya won't be able to evade, a hidden skill focusing all her magic in her fists. And she attacks Seiya, telling him to burn along with the city, but Seiya flies and destroys her with his flaming sword using a skill called Phoenix Drive. Seiya defeats Makina and Rista hugs him, but he tells her to step back, that he doesn't want to catch her illness. Rista asks Seiya why he withheld his concealment skill from her, and he tells her that if she can see his status so easily as an ally, then it's obvious that enemies could do so too. Seiya tells her that when he first started training he thought about how he would deal with that weakness, and soon after thinking that he received the concealment skill. Rista says he could have at least confided in her as his partner, and he says even if she didn't blurt out his status, there was always the possibility of a monster sucking the memories out of her brain and find out his status from there, so he had to consider everything. But Rista says surely he will protect her if that were to happen, and Seiya says she can't die because she's a goddess, so there's the need to protect her. The villagers come back and they thank Seiya for saving their town. The town mayor Graham tells Seiya that he'd like to host a welcoming banquet for him, so he should come to his mansion, but Seiya says no, that there's something he must do. Seiya uses his sword to touch Makina's remains, and when Rista asks him what he's doing, and he said since she's one of the heavenly kings she might be able to regenerate from a single cell, and he repeatedly uses hellfire to destroy the remains, which scares the villagers and they run with one of them catching on fire. Rista tells Seiya to stop and the mayor begs him to leave the town, and Seiya tells Rista the people are being rude to him, but Seiya tells him he's the one. Nina's father tells Seiya he's sorry that things are ending that way even though he saved them, and he says he wanted to at least get something for Seiya, so he gives him money, which Seiya accepts, and he says it's small and that he will take as much as he can give, but Rista says now he's a common thief. Nina says even though Seiya is sick, he's still a good person. Seiya tells her they're both right and wrong by halves. He's certainly sick, but he's far from good, but Seiya says he's not sick in any way. Rista says it takes a sick person to set the town ablaze or to extort money from another. Rista and Seiya leave, and Rista says they should hurry to the next town, but Seiya says they should go back to the God's realm, and she asks him if he's going to train more, and he says now that the monsters know he defeated one of the heavenly kings, he expects only strong enemies now will come for them, so he should prepare even more before going to the next town. Seiya says there's no guarantee he will win next time, that's why he needs to be in the best condition possible. Rista tells him that according to Ishta he will be meeting his future companions in the next town, and should he tarry he might lose the chance to acquire the best equipment. Seiya says he doesn't mind the companion thing, but he does want a weapon, and he asks her if she can't just make one like she made the bed earlier. Rista says using her powers of creation outside the God's realm is forbidden, as is bringing over anything she has made, but she says her healing magic is second to none, and Seiya tells her her healing magic is no better than herbs. Seiya asks her to open the gate to the God's realm, and they dash straight back to the God's realm. Rista and Ariadoa are talking in Ariadoa's room in the God's realm. Rista tells Ariadoa that Seiya is far too cautious, or rather than cautious, a worrywart. Rista says for just short of 100 years ever since she was born in the realm of the gods, Arya has always been kind. If Ishta is akin to her mother, then Arya would be her elder sister. Whether in appearance or experience, there is not one avenue in which she surpasses her. Rista tells Arya she wishes she can save Jiburan this instant, so as to be as great a goddess as Arya, but Arya tells her it's not her she should set as her goal. And Rista says she's a veteran whose hands have flawlessly guided heroes to the salvation of over 300 worlds. Arya says if only she had saved them all except for one world she couldn't save, but Rista tells her it is but a single world of 300, such things do happen. Arya tells Rista she's mistaken because for the denizens that world was their one and only. To say such things happen is an hollow justification. Arya says it was a rank B world, a credibly difficult challenge, and yet the mistake was her own, a cross she must bear for the rest of her life. Rista changes the topic and tells Arya that Seiya shut himself in the summoning chamber when they arrived. Seiya enters the room, which surprises both Rista and Arya, and he says he has been looking for Rista. Rista is mad because Seiya didn't give notice before he entered a goddess's room, but Arya tells her to let it go. Arya asks Seiya if he's Rista's summoned hero, and he asks her who she is. She introduces herself and asks him what's the matter, and he tells her that he's having a problem. No matter how much strength training he does, his level isn't getting any higher. Rista asks him what he wants them to do and tells him that ultimately self-training can only go so far. Instead, why don't they explore Jiburan and vanquish monsters to raise their levels? But Seiya tells her that fighting real enemies is still too risky, and he asks her to make him some dumbbells so that he can start training with those. Rista tells him no, that a stopgap like that will have him reaching his limit again in a flash. Arya tells Seiya she has a suggestion. Arya takes Seiya to the sword god Celsius and asks him to train Seiya. Rista asks Arya if it's permissible to receive training from a god, and Arya tells her she will permit it and give word to Ishta so no problem may arise. Arya tells Seiya he will never find himself in mortal danger fighting a god of the gods' realm. Such combat should also afford more experience than battling monsters, and Seiya says it's not half bad. Celsius asks Seiya if he's afraid of fighting monsters and says his training is most strict, but Seiya says he has got guts saying that and he shouldn't blame him if he ends up crying. He won't forgive him even if he tries running away from the training. Celsius says if that's how it's gonna be then they should get going already and asks Seiya to follow him. On the first day of training, Rista meets Celsius in the great dining hall in the afternoon and asks him how Seiya is faring. Celsius says he definitely has the mouth if a cheeky brat, but he must say he has more mettle than he thought. To think he'd be able to withstand his sword technique on their first day. Not that he'd ever defeat him, and Rista tells him to make sure he cuts his ego down to size with his instruction. On the second day of training, Celsius tells Rista he quit, and that Seiya's skills have rose to terrifying heights in 2 mere days, and it'd be another thing if he was at the peak of his strength. But Rista says a god cannot bring their full power to bear against a human, and Celsius says indeed. If only he could wield his true strength, he might have beat him. On the third day of training, Rista asks a devastated Celsius if he has lost weight, and he says not at all. Rista asks if his training is well, and he says it's well enough, and she asks him what well enough mean exactly, and would he mind elaborating, but Celsius shouts at her saying is this not his lunch break, so could they please not talk about training. On the fourth day of training, Rista says she hasn't seen Celsius that day, but he seemed like he was unwell the day before, so perhaps he retired to his room. Rista finishes Seiya's onigiri and says all that's left is to roll them with the dried seaweed. While getting the dried seaweed, Rista sees Celsius hiding, which startles her and she screams, but Celsius covers her mouth and tells her to keep it down. Rista asks her what he's doing there, and she says it seems he was hiding. Celsius whispers into Rista's ear that Seiya is sick. Again and again he says they've trained plenty, but each time Seiya tells him not yet and won't leave him be. Day in, day out, he's been using him as his sparring partner without rest. Rista says no wonder he looks worn down. Celsius says he has even explained that he has grown stronger than him 3 times over, but he says he won't be satisfied until he's 100 times stronger. Seiya enters and says Celsius' lunch break ended a long time ago and drags him along, but Celsius grabs onto Rista's leg and says he's not going. Arya enters and tells Rista Ishta is calling for her, and Rista rushes to see Ishta. Rista tells Ishta she's sorry for retreating into the god's realm and recruiting a fellow god to aid with their training. Ishta asks if Seiya's training is going well, and Rista says Celsius is the one about to give in. Ishta tells Rista Celsius was once a faint-hearted man himself, and Rista asks if Celsius is a human reincarnation, and Ishta says as she knows all gods were begat in the god's realm, and very occasionally humans who have done great deeds in life are reincarnated as gods. Celsius was once a human warrior, while his memories of that time have long since faded. The impressions they left deep within his soul do not fade so quickly. Being forced to endure such a hellish routine likely stirred those vestiges of weakness from him, and she's sure the training will prove beneficial for Celsius. Ishta says her purpose for calling her is to request they set out for the next town at once. Rista says she understands and asks if something has changed in Jiburan.